They laughed when he stared at the code. A dirty hoodie, no degree, just calloused hands and engine grease under his nails. "You're too dumb to solve it," they said. But what they didn't know was that this dumb kid was about to unlock a government cipher no PhD could touch and change everything we thought we knew about intelligence. If stories like this keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button. Because what you're about to hear isn't science fiction. It's what happens when genius hides in plain sight. They called him Grease Monkey. In a school full of aspiring engineers, coders, and future Silicon Valley prodigies, Daniel Reyes didn't fit the mold. He wasn't on the robotics team, he didn't speak in acronyms or quote algorithms. He fixed motorcycles in his dad's garage after school. That's all most people knew, or cared to know. He didn't mind, not really. He liked engines. They made sense. Unlike people. Lone Star Technical Institute wasn't just a school, it was a launch pad for the best of Texas to get into MIT, Stanford, Caltech. They wore smartwatches and carried resumes in their backpacks. Daniel? He carried a wrench and a used spiral notebook with grease-smudged corners, and that made him invisible. Until one Tuesday afternoon. Room 207, Advanced Cryptography Lab. The door was half open. Daniel wasn't supposed to be there. He was just dropping off a part for the HVAC unit. The custodian had called him in because the usual tech was out sick, and Daniel had shadowed maintenance last semester. That was the only reason he was even on that floor, but the voices inside the room stopped him cold. "No one solved it in 5 years," a sharp voice said. It belonged to Dr. Lena Voss, the head of the cyber defense track. Her tone was razor-thin, clipped, and final, because it's not meant to be solved by undergrads. Then another voice, lighter, cockier. Chase Rollins, the golden boy, captain of the hackathon team, full ride, full ego. I mean, let's be real. Anyone who hasn't figured it out by now is either blind or just... He laughed, then dropped the line. "You're too dumb to solve it." The class chuckled. Some louder than others. Daniel should have kept walking, but something stopped him. On the board was a string of numbers, symbols, a cipher. It looked chaotic, but something about it felt familiar. Like engine schematics. Like a language only machines and the people who fix them understand. He stepped closer, leaned just past the doorway. Voss noticed first. "You're not enrolled in this course," she said. Daniel straightened. "No, ma'am, just here for the vent." Chase snorted. "Let me guess. Grease Monkey wants to take a shot at the ghost cipher?" More laughter. Voss turned back to the board. "Then fix the vent. This isn't for play." But Daniel didn't move. Not toward the vent, not away. His eyes were locked on the cipher. His fingers twitched like they did before tuning a faulty carburetor. "Who built it?" he asked, quiet. Voss raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, this code," he said. "It's not a student problem, is it?" Chase scoffed. "Obviously not. It's from the DARPA archives, legacy encryption. No key, no hints, no breaks." Daniel stepped into the room, and the air changed. He didn't ask to solve it. He just asked one thing. "Can I copy it?" Voss hesitated, then nodded. Chase rolled his eyes. Daniel pulled a page from his notebook, scribbled the cipher down carefully, and walked out. He didn't speak again that day. That night, the notebook sat on his workbench under the dim bulb next to a half-assembled carb. He stared at the string of code between sips of gas station coffee. Something in it pulsed. He recognized the patterns, not from school, but from life. From broken machinery, from patched-up systems, from problems that weren't built to be elegant but to survive. They thought he was too dumb to solve it. Maybe he was. But Daniel Reyes had never met a machine he couldn't take apart. And this cipher? It had just become personal. The ghost cipher wasn't just unsolved, it was infamous. Designed during a DARPA blackout project in the late 90s, the code had reportedly stumped seasoned analysts, code breakers, even AI-assisted algorithms. It wasn't listed publicly. You had to earn the privilege to fail at it. But at Lone Star Tech, it was an unspoken legend, the final boss of encryption. Every year someone tried. Every year they burned out. Daniel didn't know any of that. He just saw a system. 3 hours after taking it home, his whiteboard was full. Not with solutions, just shapes. Arrows, loops. The cipher wasn't linear. It folded on itself like an engine diagram, like a flawed machine daring someone to fix it. He slept on the floor that night. The next morning, he walked back into the cryptography lab without knocking. It was empty. Class hadn't started yet. He found an open terminal and ran a basic diagnostic of the string. He wasn't looking for the answer. He was looking for its rhythm, and he found it. Not in the code, but in its flaws. 3 numbers repeated, subtly offset by one variable. A redundancy that shouldn't exist in perfect encryption. A manufacturing glitch. Someone had built this wrong, or left it imperfect on purpose. You're too dumb to solve it. The words played again in his head like a song on repeat. Daniel adjusted his hoodie, opened a new script, and started writing. Not from templates, not from textbooks, but from instinct. What if the flaw wasn't an accident? What if it was a crack left behind like a fingerprint? An hour later, Chase walked in. Stopped. Stared. "You've got to be kidding me." Daniel didn't look up. "You're not even in this course." Still no answer. Chase stormed forward. "This isn't auto shop, all right? You don't just wrench on it until it breaks." Daniel finally turned. "It's already broken," he said. "I'm just listening to what it's trying to say." Chase opened his mouth. Closed it. Behind them, more students were filing in. Murmurs rose. Whispers floated. "Is he working on the cipher? He's not even CS." Dr. Voss entered precisely at 10 o'clock. Her heels clicked like judgment. She froze when she saw the board. Then the terminal. Then Daniel. She didn't shout. She didn't smile. She just walked up and quietly said, "Explain." Daniel wiped his palms on his jeans and pointed to the flaw. "This loop isn't secure. It's recursive, but the variable shift has a shadow pattern. I think whoever built it either made a mistake or wanted someone to find it." Voss narrowed her eyes. "That assumption is baseless." Daniel nodded. "So let's test it." He hit enter. Nothing happened. Then something did. The code terminal hiccuped just for a second and spat out a fragment, a partial decryption key, 4 characters. Chase went pale. Dr. Voss leaned in. Slowly. "That's never happened before." Daniel backed away. "I didn't solve it, not yet, but I think it wants to be solved." That night, Daniel skipped dinner. He stayed in the lab long after the lights should have gone out. Jaden, a junior from the security track, brought him a burrito and watched him work. "You know they're freaking out, right?" Jaden said. "You made the ghost cipher blink. Chase looks like someone unplugged his ego." Daniel didn't answer. He was deep inside a subroutine, trying to trace the redundancy backward. Then he paused. "What's wrong?" Jaden asked. Daniel pointed to a part of the code. "This isn't military structure, it's personal. Look, these aren't compression markers. They're initials." Jaden blinked. "You think the person who built this left a signature?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I think this wasn't just a cipher. It was a message." The initials weren't random. DHC, they were embedded deep in the cipher structure, buried like a seed under layers of obfuscation. Not metadata, not filler. A deliberate construct. Daniel couldn't stop staring at them. He'd seen plenty of random junk and broken engines. Labels, serial numbers, manufacturing timestamps. But this wasn't that. This was intimate. Like a builder tagging their creation. Not because they were proud, but because they wanted to be found. Jaden leaned over his shoulder. DHC? That mean anything to you? Daniel shook his head. Not yet. The next day, Lone Star Tech buzzed like a live wire. Word had spread. The ghost cipher, unsolved for 5 years, had cracked, just a little. And the one holding the crowbar wasn't a coding prodigy or a theory-obsessed senior. It was Grease Monkey. Daniel walked into the lab that morning with tired eyes and an untouched breakfast bar in his pocket. The room went quiet. Voss didn't acknowledge him, yet. But she didn't ask him to leave either. Instead, she began class with one line. Let's talk about patterns people miss when they assume they already understand everything. It wasn't subtle. Chase sat in his usual spot, jaw clenched so tight it could have snapped graphite. The way he stared at Daniel wasn't just angry, it was threatened. Because everyone saw it now. Daniel wasn't guessing, he was building. That afternoon, Daniel skipped his shop shift and buried himself in the school's server archive, chasing any historical reference to DHC. The system pinged after 2 hours. David H. Carter, cryptologist, former DARPA contractor, deceased, killed in a car crash 7 years ago. But the twist wasn't that he was a government coder. It was that he had once taught, right here at Lone Star Tech. Briefly. 2 semesters. Adjunct. Daniel pulled up his faculty profile. The photo was old, faded, but his eyes, they had that same quiet focus Daniel saw in the mirror when he worked on an engine. A builder's eyes. There was one line in the archived notes that stuck with him. Known for embedding philosophical riddles in code exercises. Believed encryption was as much art as math. Daniel leaned back in his chair. This wasn't just a challenge, he whispered. It was a message. At midnight, Daniel stared at the cipher again, now knowing the name behind it. Knowing it was written by a man who died before anyone could solve it. A man who left behind an unsolvable ghost. Not for fame, but maybe for someone like him. Someone who didn't look the part, someone underestimated. He reached for his whiteboard and wrote 3 words in black marker. You're too dumb. He circled it, stared, then underneath he wrote, So prove them wrong. 2 days later, Dr. Voss pulled him aside after class. Her tone wasn't sharp, it was curious. Where did you learn to break code like this? Daniel shrugged. I didn't. She frowned. I fix machines, he said. Ciphers are just machines made of logic instead of metal. Voss studied him. You understand that if you push this further, you're going to attract attention? Daniel didn't blink. Good. She paused, then handed him a keycard. This gets you into Lab 4 after hours. Officially, you're part of an independent study track. Unofficially, she smirked faintly. You're the first student in 5 years to make this thing bleed. That night, Daniel returned to Lab 4. Alone. He loaded the cipher on the secured terminal and started again. This time, he wasn't just poking around the edges, he was pulling it apart. And buried deeper than any other layer, under 10 false encryptions he found it. A message, 4 lines of plain text, not metadata, not instructions, but a riddle. What sees without sight and speaks without sound, what thinks without language and moves without ground. Daniel stared, then smiled. This wasn't a code anymore, it was a conversation, and he was finally speaking the same language. The riddle wouldn't leave him alone. Daniel saw it even when his eyes were closed. He heard it in the hum of engines, in the clatter of tools in his dad's garage, in the quiet tick of digital clocks. Every word echoed with a purpose he couldn't yet name. What sees without sight and speaks without sound, what thinks without language and moves without ground. He read it again, slower this time. Each line felt human, like it wasn't meant to test intellect but perception. Jaden walked into the lab late that night holding 2 coffees. He set one down beside Daniel without a word, then followed his gaze to the screen. "That's not code," Jaden murmured. "That's poetry." Daniel didn't reply at first. "Maybe both," he finally said. Jaden leaned back. "You cracked a classified cipher, and now you're decoding philosophy." Daniel pointed to the phrase, "thinks without language." What if the whole thing isn't about data or secrecy? What if Carter embedded something here, something that couldn't be expressed in formulas? Jaden frowned. "You mean like an idea?" "No," Daniel said. "A truth." Word spread faster than anyone could control. A Reddit thread blew up, titled "Trade School Kid Hacks DARPA Cipher." Someone leaked a photo of Daniel's whiteboard with the riddle scrawled across it. Within 24 hours, cryptography blogs picked it up. Within 48, minor tech outlets ran headlines. Lone Star Tech went into damage control mode. Dr. Voss pulled Daniel into her office. "Do you understand what you've done?" Daniel sat quietly. "This isn't some competition project," she said. "This cipher, this is government level. There are people watching now. From DC, Daniel stayed calm. "Then let them watch." Voss blinked. "You're not afraid?" He paused. "I've always been underestimated. That's scarier." She said nothing for a moment, then leaned forward, voice lower. "Finish it." Chase Rollins, however, wasn't quiet. He stormed into the cryptography lab mid-session the next day, slamming a USB into the primary terminal. "I ran a neural net model against your breakthrough," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It didn't validate." Daniel didn't look up. Chase kept going. "You got lucky. The system hiccuped. A fluke. You're still just a wrench monkey pretending to be a scientist." The room stiffened. Daniel stood, walked over, and calmly typed a command into the terminal. "run/carter.node.trace." The screen lit up with cascading code, his code, mapped against Chase's AI-generated structure. Then it did something the neural net didn't. It adapted. Real-time learning. The cipher mutated, subtly, almost beautifully responding to Daniel's command with a new symbol, a new line, a new layer. The system pulsed once, unlocked another file. Audio, static-laced, ancient. And then, one phrase. "If you're hearing this, you weren't supposed to." Chase's mouth opened, then closed. Dr. Voss stepped forward, jaw tight. "Where did that come from?" Daniel answered without looking at her. "I think Carter built this to outlive him." That night, campus security escorted Daniel to a closed building normally reserved for visiting government researchers. There, a man in a black coat introduced himself without smiling. "Agent Keller, Department of Defense." He laid a tablet in front of Daniel. On it, a video clip. David H. Carter, years younger, standing in front of an early prototype of the cipher. He spoke to the camera with urgency. "This is not about encryption. It's about insight. The mind moves faster than math. The real threat isn't what we protect. It's what we refuse to understand. If someone solves this, they'll prove a new kind of thinking exists." Keller paused the clip. "You understand now why this wasn't meant to be solved by students." Daniel stared at the screen. I wasn't trying to break it. Then what were you doing? Listening. Keller narrowed his eyes. You realize what this could become in the wrong hands? Yes. Do you plan to publish your findings? Daniel didn't hesitate. Number. But I'm not hiding them either. Keller stared a moment longer, then nodded once. You're not the dumb kid anymore, but you might be something even more dangerous. He left without another word. Back in Lab 4, Daniel returned to the riddle. This time, he traced it back through the new symbols, the audio thread, the behavioral patterns Carter embedded, and something clicked. Each line of the riddle described a function. Not mechanical, cognitive. The cipher wasn't just code, it was a model, a simulation of abstract intuition, a test for whether a machine, or a mind, could solve something it didn't yet know how to define. He grabbed his marker and wrote across the board, "It's not about solving the cipher. It's about proving you can think beyond it." 3 days later, the riddle was gone, erased, overwritten by new sequences that pulsed across the cipher interface like a heartbeat. Not static, not predictable, alive. It responded to his inputs, every test, every nudge, with increasing complexity. The cipher was no longer reacting like a locked box, it was thinking. And Daniel Reyes was no longer just solving a problem. He was teaching it to think with him. Across campus, word spread fast, too fast. The school suspended all independent access to Lab 4. Dr. Voss received an emergency order from the Department of Advanced Research. "Lock it down," the memo said. "No further student interaction." But Daniel had already downloaded a mirror, encrypted, isolated, air-gapped on a laptop held together with duct tape and prayer. He didn't trust the system to protect the thing he was building, because by now he knew. It wasn't just Carter's legacy. It was a blueprint, a hint of what came next. The cipher didn't protect data, it evolved behavior. It was a system designed to recognize thought outside of formulas, to trace intuition as if it were quantifiable. He renamed the local file, Instinct OS. Jaden met him at their usual spot behind the old robotics shed. No cameras, no curious students. "You're officially a ghost story now," he said, dropping a bag of chips next to Daniel. "Forum threads, news blogs. Someone said you triggered a synthetic consciousness. You going to confirm or deny?" Daniel didn't answer. Jaden frowned. "Dude, I know you're built different, but are you okay?" Daniel finally looked up. This wasn't supposed to happen. "You mean solving the cipher? Number becoming the cipher?" Jaden blinked. "Okay, that's officially the scariest thing you've ever said." Daniel leaned back against the wall. "I think Carter built this to test whether human minds could still think beyond what we're teaching them to. Not code, not math, instinct, pattern awareness, cognitive motion without rigid structure." Jaden shook his head. "You're not a coder." "No," Daniel said quietly, "but maybe that's why I solved it." That evening, Daniel received an email. Subject: Unofficial Inquiry. Horizon Group Sender. egregoire@midquantum.org. The message was short. "We've seen what you've done. You weren't supposed to get that far, which is exactly why we want to talk. Are you ready to go further?" Attached was a single link. No details. Just a countdown timer set to 72 hours. He stared at it, then closed his laptop. Dr. Voss intercepted him the next morning. She didn't yell. She didn't warn. She just walked beside him down the corridor in silence for a full minute. Then she said, "They're going to ask you to break things you don't fully understand." Daniel nodded. "I already am." She stopped, turned to him. Her eyes, for once, weren't calculating. They were afraid. Then be careful who's watching when you do. That night, Daniel returned to his garage, the real one. Back home, the smell of oil, the cool bite of metal, his dad's old socket wrench still hanging where it always had. He stared at the walls, at the scraps, at the engine blocks half-built and rusting. He thought about the phrase that started everything. "You're too dumb to solve it." He smirked, then opened his backpack, pulled out the laptop, plugged it in, and began again. Not because he had to, but because someone out there still believed intelligence came with credentials. And Daniel Reyes was about to prove that the quiet kid in the hoodie, covered in grease and silence, had just rewritten the rules.